So new builds can be quite controversial and they get a lot of bad press due to horror stories of poor build quality, defects that go unresolved, overlooked gardens, small rooms and more. We've lived in our Persimmon New Build for 5 years now, and today I'm going to talk about our experience, and I'll be sharing everything from how we reserved our home to how we got some free extras and any issues that we had along the way. So I moved in with my husband in 2017. We moved into his house and then we decided that after 2 years, if we were still together, we would buy a house together. So he paid the mortgage and then I put money in savings that we would use towards the next house. We didn't plan on getting a new build, we just knew we needed somewhere bigger because at the time we were in a small semi-detached house. It was one of those where you walk straight into the living room and there's like a little kitchen on the side, and then upstairs there was 2 small bedrooms and a bathroom. So as I said, we didn't plan on getting a new build, and that wasn't for any particular reason. It's just something that I'd never considered. I didn't know anything about all the bad press that they get. I didn't really have any preconceived idea of what it would entail to get a new build. It just so happened that when we were looking on Rightmove, a house came up that looked ideal, and it was in a new build area, and it was in an area of York that we really wanted to live in. So I went into the sales office and we spoke to the sales rep and showed him the house that we were interested in. The house wasn't fully built yet, but it was able to show us it on the plot of land and show us what the outline of the garden and everything would be like. Then he spoke to us about the process and the part exchange process. We were also able to come down to the house and look at it, so we saw where it was at the current build stage. It was just a shell of a building at the time. So he told us what we needed to do was speak to a mortgage advisor, one of their mortgage advisors, to go through our finances and then see if we can pass the affordability checks. So they reserved the home for free for a week for us. So in that time frame we had to pass the affordability checks, and we also had to get the house valued so they could agree a price to buy it for, and if we were happy we could then officially reserve it and then pay the deposit. So the sales rep told us that there was a development about 10 miles away, and this development had this house, but it just had an extra room in the attic. So we went to see that, and then we just absolutely fell in love with it. And then we just spent the next week thinking about the house and worrying that something was going to go wrong. As you do when you're buying a new house, it gets really stressful and you're always wanting to get to the next step so nothing can ruin it. So we did agree to part exchange the house, and then the following Monday we went in and then we paid the deposit, which was £200 at the time. I do believe it's gone up now. This was in 2019. So we paid the deposit to officially reserve the house, and we picked all our extras as well. So we picked our kitchen, we picked the flooring, the carpet, we picked to have a rainfall shower in the ensuite and a few other little bits. So here's where we came across our first problem, and most of the problems that we had with Persimmons were just annoying little things that we don't see why they couldn't have been fixed. So because of the build stage the house was at, the bathroom had already been plumbed in, so this meant that we couldn't have a shower over the bath. And this really annoyed us because obviously the ensuite bathroom would be the bathroom that we would use, and then the house bathroom would be the bathroom that a guest would use. So we would want to have a shower in that bathroom as well. So we couldn't understand why they wouldn't put a shower in. So we're quite frustrated about that, but he made some phone calls and then they agreed that they would tile the bathroom and then they would put in the shower that's connected to the tap. So the hot water would just come through the tap and then it would be a shower, and that works perfectly fine. And it actually turned out to be cheaper because otherwise we would have had to pay for a proper shower unit, electric shower unit to go in there. So this worked out much cheaper. They didn't actually charge us for the shower piece, it was just for the tiling. And like I said, it works perfectly fine. I use that shower all the time because I prefer the space in it compared to the small ensuite bathroom. So the part exchange. So as I said, we agreed to part exchange our old house to buy this house. And we did that because even though we would get less for the old house, it meant that we didn't have to pay for estate agents and we didn't have to pay the solicitor's fees for the sale of that house. And it also meant that we didn't have to worry about getting an offer and accepting the offer and the buyer pulling out and all the dates lining up. So it essentially meant that we were chain free, because once they bought the house, if they didn't sell the house, that wasn't our problem. They dealt with it separately. But what they do is they sell it for a low price so it sells really quickly. So what happens is you get 3 estate agents come around. So you get 2 independent ones that you pick and one that they pick. The one that they pick obviously really undervalues the house, and then the other 2 just give what they think the house would be worth, and they take an average of that. So they valued the house the same as what my husband bought it for 2 years ago. So we believe we would have got about £7,500 more if we'd gone that route, but it would have been more stressful because we would have had to do everything ourselves in terms of finding a buyer. But because they offered us less for the house, it meant that we couldn't afford to buy this house because we'd done our figures based on getting a set amount for the old house. So they wouldn't negotiate on paying more for the old house, and they wouldn't negotiate on us paying less for this house. But what they did do is they paid our stamp duty, and the stamp duty happened to be the same amount of what the difference was. And they also gave us some other incentives, such as they turfed the lawn, they put a tap on the back of the house, they upgraded our carpets and all the kitchen things from like the standard to the next one up. So we got like premium carpets, and we got all stainless steel things rather than just the standard stuff. So we did get like a little bit out of it. And I guess in the end it just all evened out. And we also applied for a licence to occupy, which was granted. And this meant that when we completed on this house and got the keys, we could keep the old house for a few days. So we completed on the Friday and got the keys for this house on the Friday. We did the main move on the Saturday. We went back to the old house on the Sunday and cleaned and got the last few bits. And then we posted the key to the letterbox on the Monday morning. So the mortgage offer. Now this was quite a stressful thing for us, which is quite funny because this time round in the house that we're buying now, the mortgage has been the least stressful part of it. So part of that is because we were struggling to find a mortgage provider that would let us buy a new build with just a 10% deposit. So we didn't have many options. And then when we found the options and applied for it, we got picked for a random audit. And this meant that we had to do extra checks. So it actually took 4 weeks to get our mortgage offer. And it just felt like such a long time. And obviously the longer it takes, the more you're thinking, oh no, it's going to get declined. But it was all approved in the end and everything was okay. So here's where the communication started to get pretty bad between Persimmons and our solicitor. So we just didn't hear anything and we had no contact details. The only contact we had was the phone number of the sales rep. And he was often in the office on his own. And we know this because when we went to visit and do all our paperwork and pick everything, his phone would ring all the time. And because he was with us, he would ignore it. But there was no way to leave him a message. We had no email contact. There was no like voicemail on this phone. So you just ring and he wouldn't answer, but then he wouldn't call back. It was just really difficult trying to get a progress update. So we made a mistake here because we used their solicitor that they told us to use. And this is because they gave us a better price. And I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't use the mortgage broker that they advised, and I wouldn't use the solicitor that they advised. I would pick my own. And I have heard time and time again about using solicitors that people advise. So if someone tells you you've got to use a certain solicitor or a certain mortgage broker, it's just not true. They can't tell you who to use. They're only saying that because they get commission. So just before we were due to exchange, we went to the house again to see everything and to make sure we were happy with everything. So the first issue we had is they'd ordered the wrong size wardrobe. So the ceilings in this house are really high, but they just ordered like standard ones, so they had to reorder that, so the wardrobes weren't installed yet. But here I noticed that where the bed is, there's where the bed should be, and then there's 2 plugs either side, then the wardrobe is just next to it. So they'd put the plug where the wardrobe would be. So basically the wardrobe door would be like inside the wardrobe, but like also like poking out a little bit. So clearly what's happened is the electricians have come along and just done the standard thing, and no one said, well actually we're having wardrobes there, so you need to put the plugs here. They've just not communicated properly. So I told them they needed to move the plug, and they agreed that they would like relocate the plug and replaster it and everything. The other issue we had is that the side door to the garage hadn't been knocked through yet. So the garage had been built and they'd not put the door in. So we had to say to them that you need to knock it through, otherwise we're not going to exchange contracts. Because we were quite worried that they just weren't going to do it. So we decided to withhold exchanging until that point. So we exchanged contracts, and then we were hoping to complete on the 28th of May. So with new builds, it's quite... they have control of the exchange date. You can't really have control over that. It's a case of when it's done, they call you up and say, you've got 2 weeks, you know, you've got to move on this date. So we're hoping for the 28th, and then we had no information about it. No one was talking to us. We were trying to call and nobody would answer. Then eventually we got a phone call from the sales rep who said that though the house was done, the road wasn't safe for us to access because we were the first people to move onto this whole estate, and all the houses around it were still being built, so it wasn't quite safe for us to come on and move in. But again, we didn't realise at the time how lucky we were in terms of this didn't affect us in terms of having a buyer and them getting annoyed about that and wanting to push for completion and potentially pulling out. At the time, we felt so stressed. So looking back, it was always going to happen. The stress was just that we didn't know when it was going to happen. Right, so I had to stop filming yesterday because I finished the video and then I realised that my phone had run out of storage, so it cut off halfway through. And because it was like 2:30, I had to go and pick up my little boy from preschool, so I had to stop and then just restart from here. So on the 31st of May, I was sat in a bar in Manchester, Manchester because me and my friends went to see the Spice Girls reunion tour. So we were in a bar and then I get a phone call from the solicitor saying, you're going to complete in 2 weeks. So then I spent the next half an hour or so in a mad rush because I was in the centre of Manchester. I was in this really loud bar. I couldn't really hear what's going on. I'd had a little bit to drink. My husband was in the middle of nowhere because he was on his father's stag do. So he was out in the countryside. So I was trying to communicate with him and the reception wasn't great. And then I was trying to communicate with the solicitors, trying to arrange everything and get things sorted with our licence to occupy as well. So it was a little bit stressful because I wasn't really in the right situation to be taking those phone calls. But you know, it's just sod's law, isn't it? Like every other day I'm super available. I'd either be at home or at work where I could just pop into a quiet office and have the conversations. And then the one day where I'm actually out doing something social, I start getting all these phone calls and having to arrange stuff. But we did it, we got through it, and it was actually quite nice because then I could enjoy the concert and not have to worry about what was going on with the house. It was kind of like a bit of a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. So a week before completion, we met with the sales rep and the site manager at the house and we had a walk around and we just looked at everything and made sure we were happy with everything and that there wasn't any defects that we wanted to be resolved before we completed. So then we were on completion day, so we completed on a Friday, and because we had the licence to occupy, we'd not planned to do the main move until the Saturday. So in the morning, my husband went to work and did a half day at work, then I stayed home. Then at 12:04, I got a call from the solicitor to say it would completed, and then I could go and get the keys from the sales office. And then the following day we moved in, and then on the Sunday we went back to the old house, we cleaned it, we got the last few bits out. Then on the Monday morning we dropped the keys for the old house back at the sales office. So we had a month to fully snag our house, and this is where we could report anything that was wrong and they would fix it immediately. So one thing I regret here is that we didn't get a professional snagger in to do it, and I would do that again if we ever bought a new build. A professional snagger probably would have found a few extra bits that we didn't see, and then we could have got those fixed. So there were a few minor things which we noticed straight away, and they were, one of the bathroom doors didn't lock. There was glue on the outside of one of the doors. There was a hinge coming off of one of the doors. There were some screws exposed in the shower. There was a mark on the carpet. There was a chip on one of the window handles. And then as well, some of the doors, they didn't close properly. Like when they were closed, they were on a bit wonky, so they didn't close flush. So we had a joiner come around and he had to take all the doors off and like re-level them and cut a bit off the top so they fit properly. So we reported all these on the Monday and we had them fixed by the Thursday. And to be honest, they were really good with us. The site manager came around a few times to make sure that everything was okay and to check that everything got fixed properly. And we do feel like they did a good job with that. So 18 months after we moved in, I wrote another blog post containing all the issues we'd had since then. So this was just like a bit of an update of our experience with Persimmons. So the additional issues that we had since moving in were so with the doors, we found out that the hinges weren't screwed in that well because the screws were really small. So my husband went around and he put longer screws in all the doors and that fixed it because they started to like tilt after a while, and that was due to the screws. The bath sealant started to come away from the wall, so we had to completely redo that. There's a few cracks in some of the walls, like 3 altogether in the whole house, so it's not too bad. And it is very normal for a new build to get cracks in the walls, and that's due to the house settling once it's being built. So that's why they say that when you get a new build, don't paint and decorate straight away, because once the house settles, it may ruin the paintwork or the decorating that you do. So we had some issues with the stairs. So the first part was with the banister. So where the banister attaches to the walls upstairs on the landing, it started to come away from the wall, and then the skirting board down the stairs also started to come away. So we had to get someone to come and fix this. So to fix the banister, they had to put a hole in the wall to like fasten it back into the wall. So they left a hole in the wall, and then a plasterer had to come and replaster it. And they said that they was going to get a page to come and repaint it, but he didn't, so it was just left for ages with like just plaster on the wall, and in the end we ended up fixing it. So the plasterboard and the walls are not great quality. So we find often that when we're nailing things into the wall to put pictures up and things, it often crumbles, and then we have to like readjust the screw and put it somewhere else because it's just completely crumbled away. And also when we came to paint, we had to do a lot of sanding down because there were just like a lot of lumps in the paint and lumps in the plaster, so we had to sort that out before we were able to paint it. And there was like a random area in the bedroom that when we painted over it, the paint just wouldn't take to it for some reason. The other issue we had is that one day the kickboards underneath the kitchen cabinet just like fell over, and then we found out that they weren't actually secured on at all, they were just kind of like resting on. And then we looked under the cabinets and there was just like loads of like dust and screws and rubbish underneath like the cabinets. So we swept it out, and it didn't take long for us to sweep it out, but still it's kind of like, why would you build a new kitchen and just leave all the rubbish like underneath the cabinets. So to the garden now. So after a while we put some decking down, and obviously we did this square in the corner of the garden, and it really highlighted that the fence wasn't actually straight. It was wonky, so there was a big gap between the end of the decking and where the fence was. And also the quality of the grass wasn't great. It wasn't really the quality of the grass, it was more that when they were building the house, they've clearly just thrown loads of rubble and bits of screws and that all over the floor and then put the grass on top of it. So when you walk on the grass, sometimes you can feel it's quite lumpy underneath your feet. And also when we dug out for the decking, we came across loads of random bits of rubbish. So another issue that we almost have is that behind us, it was just kind of like a bit of a wildflower wasteland behind us, and there was plans to put bungalows there. And then halfway through, Persimmons tried to apply for planning permission to put some like 4-bedroom, 2-storey houses. Then there would be like a house directly looking onto our garden. This meant as well that there'd be a lot of houses crammed into a small space because they was trying to make it into a cul-de-sac, and it would have put a lot of pressure on the parking and the roads in the area. Thankfully that got declined, which is good, because we actually paid an extra £5,000 for this house because of the plot and where it was, because there was nothing overlooking the front and at the back, so it would have been frustrating to then get something built behind it. So after 3 years, we had some issues with the windows where the seals had broke, so there was getting condensation on the inside of the double glazing. So we did identify this before our 2 years were up, so we were able to get those fixed free of charge. So we had about 5 different window panels which had to be taken out and fully replaced. We also had another issue with the toilet. So one of the toilets started leaking, so we got a plumber out, and it turned out that the seal had broken, so they'd used quite a cheap plastic seal. So the plumber replaced them with metal ones, and he also replaced the other 2 toilets with the same metal one, so we don't have that issue anymore. My husband also had to replace something inside each cistern in all 3 toilets, so I'm not sure what it was, but when we flushed the toilets they would run for quite a while afterwards, so we changed that and now we don't have the issue anymore. So the final issue we had was with the road. So this wasn't anything to do with the house, it's just the road outside, so the bricked or the road outside the house, and it does look really nice, but the issue is that the bricks started to come up and they started to wobble, and like the sand between them started to disappear like in the rain and stuff. So you could see when it rains, like the road dips down ever so often and puddles gather, and when cars go over them you can hear that they're loose because they make a lot of noise and a lot of sand was coming up. So we had to have them taken up and relaid, and annoyingly they did this when I was 40 weeks pregnant, and so I couldn't park outside my house or on the drive, and I was quite worried that I might have to go to hospital but I wouldn't have access to get out of the house. I had to park my car a bit further down the street, and I remember I had to go out to a midwife appointment and I was like waddling down the street, and it was really uncomfortable. But since that was done nearly 4 years ago, we've not had the issue since, so hopefully it will be okay going forward. So as you can see, I think that we've been quite fortunate. This estate in general seems to be quite good. You don't hear a lot of people complaining about mistakes. Whenever somebody comes onto the community page and says they want to buy a house here and asks about experiences, everyone has really good things to say. It's always just there's a few minor issues that get fixed straight away, the site manager's really good. And I do get the impression that when you buy a new build, it can vary a lot from estate to estate. So you do get some estates that are notoriously bad. So when a new build estate is being built, they will employ local contractors, and many of them will just come in and do a mediocre job or trying to cut corners. And you can often see that the same estates that have got a lot of problems have the same issues over and over and over again. But we must have had a good team here because we don't have a lot of issues. So I don't want to generalise and say that all contractors are bad, because obviously we've had good ones. I guess in any line of work that you do, there's always going to be some people that are not as careful as others, and some people that will cut the corners and take the chance to try and do that, and some people that are lazy, unfortunately. So if you do want to buy a new build, I recommend that you find the local Facebook community page and join it and see what the atmosphere on there is like, see what people are talking about. Lots of people make posts just saying, I'm interested in this estate, what's it like? And then people will answer. So there's lots of information on there. So yeah, overall, I've been really happy with this house. I do love this house a lot, and I love the area that we're in, and I love the estate that we're on. The only reason that we're moving is because the house isn't big enough for us. We want a bigger garden and we want a little bit more privacy. So the house that we're hopefully moving to doesn't have any neighbours next to it. So hopefully we will get that peace and quiet which we're looking for.